So I actually did a video on both Starfighter games already about a year and a half ago as of writing this, but looking back, I wasn't satisfied with how I handled that coverage, and there's so much that I missed that I've decided it was necessary to revisit and take a proper look at Star Wars Starfighter.
Sleeping on the job already, eh?
I'm sorry.
Developed and published in-house by LucasArts, Star Wars Starfighter is a vehicle-based action game set during the events of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and tells the tie-in side story of an unlikely band of heroes who aided in the fight against the Trade Federation's occupation of the planet Naboo. Now, when this game was released back in February of 2001, it was sort of breaking new ground by being the first Star Wars game to launch on the Sony PlayStation 2, which had only been out for roughly a year at the time. I feel like it's often compared to its N64 counterpart, Battle for Naboo, which launched on the Nintendo 64 less than 2 months earlier, and I mean, the comparisons are understandable. Both games take place at roughly the exact same time in the chronology, they're both centered primarily around this same exact event, and both lean heavily on the iconic N1 Starfighter for their marketing. Not to mention sharing different versions of the exact same final battle. Those things aside, however, the two stories are vastly different, with Starfighter featuring multiple protagonists across multiple different planets and far better space battles compared to Battle for Naboo, which, to be fair, is focused almost entirely on in-atmosphere and ground battles and never leaves the planet Naboo. Also, Starfighter looks and controls significantly better.
What do you have in mind?
Although it initially only released for the PS2, Starfighter was eventually ported to the Microsoft Xbox roughly 10 months later, and then to the PC another 2 months after that. There was also an arcade cabinet designed for a specific smaller version of this game with less missions, and it's apparently extremely rare, so if you've ever seen one of these, consider yourself lucky. As for the PC and Xbox ports, both were handled by a studio called Secret Level Inc., and although the PC version was a straight-up port of the PS2 version with no real changes, the Xbox version is a little different. Rather than just port the game straight to the Xbox, Secret Level decided to include a number of improvements and new features such as several new bonus missions, unlockable alternative vehicles to play in the campaign, improved graphics and fidelity, and even several additional two-player modes and bonus missions as well. They then rebranded it as Star Wars Starfighter Special Edition as an acknowledgement of its improvements and additional features, and likely a reference to the Special Edition versions of the original trilogy released a few years earlier. So with that in mind, I obviously opted to use the Xbox version of the game to record my footage so I could talk about the bonus content, but also it does genuinely look better than the PS2 version. As for the PC version, it was released a full 2 months after the Special Edition, so I'm not really sure why they decided to port the PS2 version of the game over instead of the clearly superior Xbox Special Edition.
Here I am about to flush your body out and strip your motor down for parts. You got a nice ship. Hey, back off!
What's even crazier is that the PC version has basically no mod support or even a stable widescreen fix. So although I would assume that it has the potential to be the optimal version, right now it just isn't. Which is a shame, since it is readily available on Steam for purchase, but again, it's not even the better version of the game and isn't well optimized at that. As of making this video, I've heard nothing about any kind of remaster for this game, but given how Aspyr seems to be cranking out remasters of old Star Wars games, I would hope that they use the Special Edition as their base instead of the PS2 version or pre-existing PC port if they decide to do one. As for the game we have now, it's pretty straightforward overall. Players are placed in the pilot seat of various different starfighters across 14 playable missions and are tasked with completing a set of objectives to beat each mission. The objectives can vary quite a bit from mission to mission, ranging from disabling freighters to defending friendly bases, but at their core, each of these levels is pretty much the same, and the gameplay itself is just very simple, both in concept and execution. Fly around a designated area, be it in space or in the air, and dogfight against enemy fighters while attempting to complete the aforementioned objectives. Now, across these 14 missions, Starfighter does actually have a unique new story to tell that runs parallel to the events of the Phantom Menace, and features a fresh cast of characters for players to meet and inhabit as they experience the narrative.
Nim. We meet at last.
The story of Star Wars Starfighter follows three seemingly unrelated pilots as they each overcome a series of their own challenges before eventually coming together with the common goal of fighting back against the Trade Federation's occupation of Naboo. The first of these characters we as the player are introduced to is Reese Dallows, a young rookie pilot who only just recently joined the Naboo Royal Space Fighter Corps. Reese is a homegrown Naboo native born in the capital city of Theed and raised by his school teacher mother. From childhood, Reese had dreamed of being a pilot, just like his freighter pilot father who went missing during a routine mission and never returned during Reese's youth. Although he was initially assigned to Echo Flight, where he piloted an NX police cruiser, a fateful battle at Station TFP-9 allowed him to show off what he was capable of, where he helped Bravo Flight fight off a force of pirates. None of this is shown or talked about in the game, by the way, but rather this information comes from The Starfighter Trap, a short story written by Steve Miller to appear in the first issue of the Star Wars Gamer magazine, published by Wizards of the Coast. This short story is really fun and features a number of recognizable characters from the film, such as Rick O'Lee and C.O. Bibble. Okay, well, recognizable for Star Wars fans at least.
The death toll is catastrophic. You must contact me.
Anyway, it's a great story and neatly sets players up for the game's plot. I'll put a link to it in the description if any of you want to read it. The whole thing is only a few pages long, and it's pretty great.
Well, well, the cavalry. What kept you, flyboys?
With his natural talents and clear capabilities on full display, Bravo flight leader Asara Till had Reese Dallows transferred to Bravo to begin training with the best and taking flight in the iconic N1 Starfighter, which is where the game begins. This first mission is very much a tutorial level both for the player and for Reese as a character. Asara Till guides the player through this long canyon as she trains him on how to use the N1, and it's during this that the player can familiarize themselves with controlling the ship's various functions as they take out a series of floating mines and then a few squads of holo fighters. I really love how they bothered to model out these holo projectors to explain where the holo fighters are coming from. They didn't need to do this. I doubt most people would have questioned or cared, but this was just loyalty to the immersion and the universe, and these little details matter to me. We get some fun banter between the two pilots before she informs Reese that his final challenge is to overcome her in a fighter battle to see who can knock out the other's shields first. Of course, being the player character, Reese wins the duel, and the two fly off to their first mission as Asara welcomes Reese officially into Bravo Squadron.
So I made it?
Yep. Besides, I need a good partner for the Royal Escort.
And the game treats us right away by throwing the player into a space mission as Asara and Reese have been assigned as escorts for Queen Amidala. The Queen's presence has been requested by some Trade Federation officials, although I'm not sure what the topic of said meeting was regarding as it isn't stated, but given the strange choice of location for the meeting, Reese accurately assesses it to be a trap. Before Amidala can board the Trade Federation Lucrehulk-class battleship, it makes the jump to hyperspace, leaving her stranded in space as a group of mercenary ships show up out of nowhere and begin an assault on her royal starship. This is what the Naboo Royal Space Fighter Corps are trained for, and it's finally time for them to earn their keep as Reese and Asara fend off the mercenary attack with finesse to buy time for Amidala's ship to make the jump to lightspeed as well. Unfortunately, despite managing to defend the Queen long enough for her to escape, the two pilots are overtaken as Asara is killed and Reese's starfighter is disabled, leaving him stranded in deep space. Shortly after this, as Reese and his astromech droid Wrench sit derelict in the void, a Toydarian scavenger named Reddy shows up hoping to strip the ship for parts before realizing that there's someone still alive in there. The two interact for a bit before Reddy agrees to give Reese a ride and tow his ship back to safety as they search for Asara, only to find her lifeless body in the cockpit of her starfighter.
You know her.
Asara.
Sorry.
Man, what a sad way to go. Given the situation, Reddy calls on a friend of his to ask if they can use her base to repair Reese's ship and get him home. She reluctantly agrees after expressing some discontent towards his rank.
Oh, great. Another idealist.
Well, not at the moment.
We then swap perspectives to follow this new character we've just been introduced to. This is Vanna Sage, a freelance mercenary currently under contract for the Trade Federation. Born on Alderaan, Vanna would leave home at only 15 years old to pursue life as a pilot by joining up with the Royal Naboo Security Forces and serving for several years. Eventually, Vanna left both Naboo and the RNSF out of frustration when her repeated attempts at convincing the Naboo government that they needed more defenses were ignored. So now she lives on her own, working for whomever offers her the most credits for the skill set she built in her time serving on Naboo, and currently, that's the Trade Federation. Here, the third mission of the game depicts Vanna working a troubleshooting job testing out the capabilities of the experimental new Scarab fighters for the Trade Federation. All seems to be going well too, until suddenly Vanna's astromech droid Mod 3 intercepts a transmission that she wasn't supposed to hear about a planned illegal invasion of Naboo. Seemingly caught red-handed, the Trade Federation immediately terminates Vanna's contract and sends both a squad of hunter-killer droids and a band of hired mercenaries to destroy her before she can tell anyone what she heard.
This is your last fight, Vanna. Can't say I'll miss you.
We'll see about that.
After fending off the attackers, Vanna ends up following one of the hunter-seeker droids she didn't destroy down to the nearby volcanic planet of Eos, where she is led to a massive droid manufacturing facility. Now, the thing about Eos is that it's well known to be basically uninhabitable due to the obvious environmental condition, but it's also incredibly mineral dense, making it the perfect place to hide an unsanctioned droid manufacturing facility such as the one you're seeing now. Unfortunately for Vanna, a massive shield bubble comes online shortly after she enters and traps her inside, leaving her with no choice but to fight through a horde of hunter-seeker droids in order to knock out enough shield generator towers to let her escape. That said, it's pretty clear something needs to be done about that factory, and her ship doesn't have enough firepower to handle the job. So Vanna plans to head back to her home base, relink with her old friend Reddy while he helps Reese fix his fighter and bring back her recently acquired new bomber fighter to take care of things here, hopefully for a fat payday.
That's the last time I do business with those guys.
Although things are seldom that simple. Making it back to her home base, Vanna touches her ship down and lands safe and sound to begin planning her next move on Eos when she's come upon by some unfortunate circumstances.
You've got my bomber, that's all I care about.
A well-known Fioran pirate named Nim has been waiting to pay her back for putting him in prison and stealing his Havoc bomber fighter. The two have a brief conversation where she convinces him to spare her life in exchange for some potentially profitable information regarding the droid manufacturing facility she just found out about on Eos. Nim spares her but locks her up long enough to tend to other business with plans to return and figure out more about what she knows.
Come back, you space slug!
The game now puts us in control of this Fioran pirate as we take over the aforementioned business, which turns out to be a piracy attack on a series of Trade Federation freighters to steal their supplies. Dialogue leads us to believe this is the big one, a massive pirate raid primed to offer their biggest payday yet. And not only that, but it'll be passing right over the very planet where their home base is, making this too good an opportunity to pass up. Now, at a glance, this might seem like a small subplot side quest to act as filler for the game and introduce us to the pirate character Nim, but knowing what I know about the old EU lore, this is actually one of the most profound missions in the game. Although both this mission and the next two after it have little to nothing to do with the game's main story, in an implicative way, it has everything to do with the entire plot of the Phantom Menace itself. What we're doing here while playing as Nim is leading our ragtag group of pirates as we pillage an entire fleet of Trade Federation supply freighters, which, as you can guess by the name alone, means these supplies were on their way to a destination to be, well, traded. Depending on just how much of a geek you are, you may have read a novel by James Luceno called Star Wars Cloak of Deception that takes place just under a year before the events of the Phantom Menace, and subsequently, also this game. In that book, we're given some immense insight into why the Trade Federation occupied Naboo, why it's important that Naboo signs a treaty with them, why they have their own droid army, and what it took to make them desperate enough to begin working with Darth Sidious, aka Palpatine, to begin with. Cloak of Deception is one of my favorite Star Wars novels, and probably one of the best in general, so if you ever wondered exactly what was going on in that movie, or just wanted some extra Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan story, then I heavily recommend reading it.
I shall do what I must, Obi-Wan.
I won't exhaust you with all the details, but in essence, the Trade Federation has been begging the Galactic Republic for legal permission to have its own military to protect itself because their supply runs have been getting completely pillaged by pirate mans across the Outer Rim. These pleas fall repeatedly on deaf ears as the Galactic Republic not only refuses to provide sufficient protection for their supply freighters, but also repeatedly deny them the right to protect themselves with their own military, all the while promising to find an adequate solution while over and over delaying and achieving practically nothing while more and more Trade Federation freighters are stripped, stolen, or destroyed. In the book, we learn this predicament and its long delays in resolution are being cleverly created by Palpatine himself as he advises Chancellor Valorum in ways that ensure little is done to relieve the burden the Trade Federation faces, which results in meeting with them as his alter ego and promising them an alternate solution.
I will make it legal.
What you're seeing here, what you as the player would be doing here, is literally part of the whole problem. Repeated attacks on Trade Federation supply runs like this are what caused them to desperately begin illegal production on their droid army in an effort to defend themselves from pirate raids like Nim and his gang are doing here. After a hard-fought space battle, the supply super freighter goes crashing down towards the planet Locke, where Nim and his gang of pirates chase it down to the planet's surface to steal the cargo.
Come on, it's payday.
This mission is relatively simple. The goal is to protect Nim's cargo freighter and his pirate crew while they strip the downed Trade Federation super freighter of its cargo. Like I pointed out before, this planet is called Locke, and it's another barren world, although notably more habitable than Eos was, as you can tell. It's mostly desert with a variety of mountain ranges across its surface with massive oceans of pure sulfur flowing through various rivers, some of which we can actually see from here. Both this mission and the next one will be taking place on Locke, but for now we fight back the pursuing forces trying to reclaim the lost cargo that Nim's pirate gang quickly loads aboard their own freighter before escaping into some underground catacombs where they disappear for a while before taking the loot back to their base. As it turns out, however, the Trade Federation isn't taking these raids lying down anymore, and this particular big raid turned out to be predictably too good to be true, as in it was a trap so they could track these pirates down to their home base and kill them all for good.
Scout 21R5, please maneuver to assist. Are you there, Danbury?
Well, there they are, and they're very unhappy. This is another simple defense mission where the player, still in control of the pirate Nim, will be defending his pirate base while the people in it completely evacuate. It'll be a lot of destroying freighters, tanks, and bombers, and if you miss too many or aren't fast enough, then they'll destroy too much of your base and you'll fail the mission. If you hold them off long enough, however, your people will make it out alive and set a self-destruct sequence on the base, destroying everything left along with the invading forces. In the meantime, however, we're taken back to Vanna's base where we see Reddy and Reese arriving to make the repairs to his ship.
Well, a ship is here, but where's Vanna?
What's that?
Well, well, the cavalry.
They, of course, find Vanna trapped in the cell Nim left her in before freeing her as she helps Reese repair his N1 Starfighter. The two then discuss the factory she found on Eos as they begin to formulate a plan to destroy it before it can send even more droids after Naboo. Just then, Nim returns to Vanna's base as he promised, only to find her having gotten out of her cell. He admits to her that she was right all along about the Trade Federation and that they wiped out his base. This leads her to introducing Nim to Reese and Reddy, with weapons drawn of course, before offering to let him in on the plan they're working on to destroy the droid factory.
You and whose army?
Yours.
This puts us back in control of Reese again, where we're flying the N1 into another space battle along with Nim, Vanna, and Reddy, with the goal of taking out the orbital satellites and TF freighters to prep for the assault on the factory. Although players will need to watch out for the orbital cannon taking shots at them from the planet's surface. This is roughly halfway through the game, so players will probably be familiar enough with how to play by this point. From here on out, it's all about just enjoying the game for what it has to offer, although it does bring to mind my one real criticism. Each mission in Starfighter has a multitude of objectives for the player to complete, both mandatory and optional, but the primary ones are often either attention demanding or time sensitive, which means you pretty much never get the chance to do any regular Starfighter dogfighting. I mean, everything is there for it, and you certainly can just get sidetracked to fight other fighters, but a lot of times this would quickly result in a mission failure because something I was supposed to be defending got blown up, or something I was supposed to be destroying got away. It's a minor criticism, all things considered, but a lot of the time what you're supposed to be doing is pouring laser fire into a bullet sponge object until it dies, which gets a little old after a while.
Try not to get killed.
We're trying. Now go!
After taking out the orbital defenses, the game puts us back into Nim's perspective as he and Vanna stage a full-on assault against the droid factory. A mission that is actually relatively difficult. There's turrets everywhere, and after Vanna took out the shield generator, they doubled down on their defenses, so there's a lot more Scarab fighters to deal with than before. Although it's cool that we finally get to take on this factory that's been such a plot point so far. Destroying this thing should help mitigate the amount of droids planned for the Naboo invasion, too. All of this is going down between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan saving Amidala and then returning from Coruscant, just to give you a frame of reference for when this is happening. There's a series of buildings and structures like a landing pad, power station, command center, etc., and we have to track them all down and destroy them with Nim's bomber. Blowing up whole structures like this was actually quite the spectacle back then. I mean, this wasn't just cool for Star Wars fans, but sci-fi and flight sim fans in general. Not saying this game is a flight sim by any means, but you get what I'm saying. With the droid factory in ruins, our ragtag group of warriors has dealt a crippling blow to the Trade Federation's army, and we even get a really cool cutscene of the factory exploding before the crew punches it to Naboo to find the entire planet under a blockade.
All right then, boys, follow my lead.
Back in control of Vanna and her guardian Mantis, we push through a squad of droid starfighters as we fly to face the blockade.
I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
The objective is to disable the shields on one of those freighters so Reddy can board it and steal a handful of their munitions to deliver to the Naboo resistance on the planet's surface. While Reddy does his plundering, it's up to us to blow the remaining freighters into scraps and ashes. This is probably the best space battle in the game, honestly. I mean, it's not annoyingly demanding, and it's one of the only missions you can kinda take your time and enjoy the game's combat against other starfighters in a satisfying way. The scale is massive, there's a multitude of freighters to destroy, not to mention a handful of missile frigates to take out. Once they're done punching a hole through the blockade, having captured a solid amount of munitions, our heroes head down to the surface to drop off the supplies they just stole. Back on old Naboo again, the game has us fly through the canyon from the tutorial level again, only this time it's loaded with droids trying to kill us, which adds a new dynamic to a familiar level.
Follow me. I remember this place.
Just keep me alive, Reese.
I love the chance to fly around in the N1, and this level gives you such a fantastic opportunity to play with the admittedly really solid flight controls. The first time I talked about this game on the channel a while back, this level was the bane of my existence, but it's because I really didn't spend enough time with the game to realize there was a third-person mode that makes some of these levels way easier. I'll talk more about that later. I mean, it doesn't get more simple than this one. We fly through the canyon, take out whatever droids are in our way, defend Reddy, and try not to crash into the canyon wall. Hammering home the gorgeous paradise planet aesthetic of Naboo, this next level is one of the most unique ones in the game. Tasked with playing escort for a group of land speeders, we need to destroy a series of Trade Federation land turrets and an energy barrier so those speeders can break a group of RNSF hostages out of these small prison areas. Reese, Reddy, and a few members of Bravo Flight then follow along the progression of the Salu River to a series of nearby islands referred to as the Europa Islands, where they make a stand to guard the speeders long enough for the speeders to hit land and get picked up by a shuttle. While all of this is going on, we swap perspectives to see what Vanna and Nim are doing in the meantime. And it happens to be a climactic aerial battle across the great grass plains of Naboo, while the final showdown between the Gungans and droids we see in the film is taking place. Despite this looking a lot like the battle we see in the film, where the droid invasion force battles the Grand Gungan army due to the massive shield, it's actually not. There were 3 droid strike forces on Naboo, and the one from the film was simply the largest one. This one is a smaller shield put up to guard the Resistance outpost the RNSF Resistance has been forming across both this game and, if I'm not mistaken, the Battle for Naboo game as well. They were striving for a lot of consistency in the early prequel days, and it was great. All the player really needs to do is fly around and bomb a bunch of tanks and ships. After a few minutes, Reese and Reddy do come flying in from the last mission to help out, which adds a lot of immersion to the level. Given what the game is, I think this is a really solid penultimate mission and makes a great treat for fans of the film to dig in and enjoy. Of course, you can probably guess that the final level sees us taking control of Reese again as we fly the N1 into space to join the rest of the squad in one final assault on the Lucrehulk-class battleship.
Welcome back, Bravo 10. Who trained you?
Asara Till.
Who? I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
I was trained by the best, sir.
Well, we'll make them proud, pilot.
I will, sir. I will.
I mean, this final battle is outright iconic. Even though this isn't the first game to let us play a version of this space battle, it's still a great finale for this story. and the level itself is admittedly fun to play, though albeit with some annoyances. These red explosives that act a lot like the seismic charges from the second film, except of course being red, are insanely frustrating to deal with, and the mission throws them at you constantly. Interestingly though, they bring in the mercenary ship that killed Asara in the second level in a kind of duel-like showdown for Reese to enact justice for him killing his mentor. It's a little over the top, but very in line with Star Wars, so I won't pretend that I don't enjoy it. Eventually, the game takes us inside of the control ship where the final battle between Reese and the mercenary leader takes place, and we get to knock out the shield generator from the inside. I don't love this, to be honest. I see what they were going for, letting players experience the iconic Anakin sequence, but I mean, when Anakin did it, there was a sense of destiny to it, like no one else but him could have done something like that. You know, being the Force-sensitive chosen one and all. There must have been a better way to end this final battle other than ripping off the film's finale, right? Either way, it's what we got, and Reese kills his enemy, knocks out the shield generator, and escapes the ship before Anakin does his thing.
Now this is pod racing.
And Reese comes flying out of the thing triumphantly as if he was the one that blew it up, even though we all know he wasn't. It's a little silly, but still, I see its merits. The final cutscene shows Vanna and Nim having a conversation in a hangar as the ending celebration from the film takes place down on the streets, which I love seeing a different angle of that ending, actually. Reese and Reddy show up to join them as they all discuss parting ways. Reese, Reddy, and Vanna opt to stay on Naboo and continue to serve there, but Nim leaves to return to his life as a pirate captain. And with that, the credits roll. I mean, for a story in a vehicular combat game that will last you no more than 4 hours before seeing the end, I think this is surprisingly competent. The characters are all dynamic, interesting, and unique from one another. Each has their own motivations and personality traits, and despite the fact that this is clearly a tie-in game with the first film, the majority of its plot is still very much its own, and that makes it feel original. This would be the last we ever saw of Reese Dallos, as he doesn't show up again in any EU canon material, although his cut inclusion from the non-canon Star Wars Galaxies MMO leads us to believe that when the Galactic Empire was formed, he went on to join up with the Rebel Alliance. But again, not only is Galaxies not EU canon, but his character's inclusion was cut anyway, so it didn't even happen. As for the rest of the crew, they all have more appearances that I'll cover when I get to them later down the line. For now, let's talk a bit about the gameplay.
What's up, Ugly?
Look who's talking.
For the most part, what you've seen is what you're going to get. Your ship flies forward on its own, but you're in charge of speeding up or slowing down, which allows some degree of versatility regarding movement. Every ship features a similar primary laser fire, but each one has its own unique alternate fire to employ during combat. Depending on which ship you're flying, you'll either have proton torpedoes, proton bombs, or ion-enabled tags. Each of these has their own uses. As for the camera controls, you can switch between a first-person and third-person viewpoint on the fly during gameplay, and despite my initial assumption that this was mainly up to preference, each viewpoint is actually more advantageous than the other depending on what you're doing. When I was playing through the game for the gold medals, on each level I found myself swapping between perspectives to suit the action I was in, such as third person over navigating harsh environments and first person for more precise aiming. And lastly, a mechanic that is super cool in concept but ended up being pretty much useless in execution is the ability to command your allies in combat. You can order them to attack a specific enemy, focus on defense, or just have them regroup on your position. The reason I say it was useless, however, is because when I would tell them to attack a certain target, it would take them 3 times longer to destroy it than it would have taken me. And you better only be telling them to focus on bigger targets because they basically can't deal with destroying individual fighters. It's still a cool system to have, and every once in a while it would work well, but mainly in missions with a lot of larger objects for me to direct their focus towards.
This one goes there, that one goes there, right?
Let's talk a little bit more about the 3 primary ships you'll be flying across the game's campaign. First up, I know I don't need to say much about the N1 Starfighter. You all already know what it is. I mean, I've called it iconic in this video already so far, but let's be real for a second. I think most of us would struggle to find someone we could show a picture of this thing to that wouldn't either know or guess that it's from Star Wars. Manufactured by the Theed Palace Space Vessel Engineering Corps, it's considered a luxury starfighter, and as you've seen, it's clearly capable of a lot during combat. As for the second ship we fly, Vanna Sage's Guardian Mantis is one of a kind, and was manufactured by a rogue Z-Char engineer before it wound up in Vanna's hands. The Xichar are a whole can of worms that I'm not going to get into here, but in a nutshell, they're religious fanatics who worship hard work and engineering like a religion, and they were involved in manufacturing a number of Trade Federation products as well. The notable thing about this fighter, as mentioned earlier, is its ion tag system, which fires off nanotags that disrupt and disable a fighter's deflector shields, and act as a homing beacon for the Mantis's nanomissiles. Lastly, Nim's pride and joy, the Havoc, is a heavily modified Skurg H-6 bomber, armed with not only its primary laser cannons, but also 2 additional self-operated rotating laser cannons to fend off other fighters from all directions. Not to mention it's been outfitted with its own hyperdrive, which does make sense given that it's quite a bit bigger than your average fighter. In fact, pre-modifications, it was intended to require 5 crew members to operate, but Nim ensured with some heavy alterations that he could run it by himself with the aid of 2 astromech droids. And with these 3 fighters, players will take on the Trade Federation across the game's 14 available missions.
Come on, live dangerously.
At the end of each mission, we're treated to a results screen where we can observe how we performed, see what we missed, and decide if we want to go back in to do better. You'll notice that these screens show a medal system with rankings of bronze, silver, and gold. You can consider a mission complete and move on to the next one just by achieving the primary objectives, but in order to achieve higher medals, you'll need to complete each bonus objective as well. Doing so isn't just for bragging rights either, as this is the way players can unlock the game's various bonus missions, and the main reason I opted to use the Xbox version for my footage. Although I did think these bonus missions were fun, there's really not much here that we haven't seen in the single player mode already at this point. The first bonus mission is called Fighter Training and sees us back in the N1 as Reese fends off a few waves of holo fighters for practice. The second is called Ground Attack Training, where we're once again fighting waves of holographic enemies, only this time as Nim and in atmosphere as opposed to in space. The third bonus mission is where we finally get something unique. It's called Charm's Way and takes us way back to before the invasion of Naboo began, as we get to play as Asara Till for the first time. As Asara, we have to defend a convoy of merchant ships as they depart from Naboo and are set upon by a series of pirates hoping to pillage them. One of these ships is called the Charm's Way and is piloted by none other than Reeve Dallows, father of Reese Dallows.
Reese Dallows, Bravo Flight.
So clean cut.
Asara defends the ships until they can make the jump to lightspeed, but as I mentioned way earlier, Reeve would not return from this journey, so it's kind of a dark mission knowing that, but it's cool that Reese's father even got to make an appearance at all. This is really the most intriguing of the available bonus missions narrative-wise, and is kind of like a retroactive prologue to the main game in a way. The fourth bonus mission, called Canyon Spirit, just puts us back in the tutorial level canyon again as we take control of Reese in a non-canonical race against the other protagonists from the game. The fifth one, Outpost Attack, returns us to Vanna's perspective again as she defends a mining outpost against a Trade Federation attack. I'm not sure where in the timeline this takes place, but I'm going to assume it's after the main game. Waves of starfighters will come down and attack the outpost, and the player has to defend it to complete the mission. And lastly, Space Sweep is an arcade-like minigame where we play as Nim again and destroy as many asteroids as we can to rack up a high score. It's a neat little addition that makes the game feel all that much more as though it was made with passion. These little details like this didn't have to be there, but the devs just wanted to have fun extra content for players to enjoy, and I can appreciate that.
You ever get sick of working in paradise? You know who to call.
Now normally this is where it ends. If you're playing the PS2 or PC versions of the game, that's all there is to offer here. But the Xbox Special Edition comes in clutch with 2 more bonus modes for players to engage with. The first of these is called Droid Hunt and puts us back with Vanna again as she flies back to Eos to check on the factory they destroyed, only to find it being put back together by a series of mining droids they left behind before. Here the player has to fly around the map and collect each of these mining droids in order to complete the mission. I personally headcanon this as happening after the Outpost Attack bonus mission, where Vanna wonders where the droids came from to attack said outpost and goes out to investigate the factory on a hunch. And lastly, the final bonus mission is called Serious Swarm, and is easily the most excessive of any level in the game. To give you an idea of why I say that, there's a bonus objective for beating it in under 30 minutes. We take control of Reese one last time as literal waves of enemies descend upon him one after another. Probably the most notable thing about this mission is that we finally get to destroy one of these landers, which I kept trying to do in the main campaign to no avail since I think they're indestructible there. Either that or I wasn't patient enough, but here we get to blow one of them up and it's very satisfying. Also, Darth Maul's Sith infiltrator comes flying in, controlled by the mercenary leader from the end of the last campaign mission, and we have to blow him up, which makes me think this is probably all just a dream sequence in Reese's head. Either way, it's for sure the longest level in the game, and a fun inclusion for the special edition overall.
I'll see you later. Maybe.
The last of the extra bonuses are 4 two-player versions of the single-player levels we've already gone over, those being Droid Hunt, Charm's Way, Canyon Race, and a different two-player version of that called Night Canyon where it's a 1v1 race. And lastly, if you get all of the gold medals across every campaign mission, you'll have unlocked the ability to replay any mission in a variety of vehicles that we otherwise wouldn't get to use, including Ready Zoomer, a Scarab Fighter, the Police Cruiser, and the Sith Infiltrator. I mean, they went the extra mile here for a bonus unlockable that probably less than half of everyone who owned this game ever even saw. Look, they gave the thing its own unique heads-up display, and of course, it's one of the best ships in the game. Seriously, flying around in this thing is exactly as fun as it looks. The Police Cruiser is another really cool vehicle that I appreciated being included here. It's only accessible through a cheat code input, but it still feels even more connected to the EU with its addition. Now before we wrap up, this game is a little bit known for being totally jam-packed with secrets and Easter eggs, and as such, I figured I'd bring in another expert who I know is a huge fan of the game to talk about it. Flandrew, what can you tell us about the secrets hiding within Star Wars Starfighter?
Thank you, Evan. Like most LucasArts games of the time, Starfighter was filled with Easter eggs. From concept art galleries and bizarre developer Christmas messages, to this battle droid casually grilling some sausages on top of an asteroid. But the game's best Easter egg is one I found accidentally when I was 9. Starfighter was the first PlayStation 2 game I ever got, and the first game I ever played that utilized both analog sticks. So naturally I was terrible at it, smashing my poor N1 all around the Naboo canyons. At one point I had accidentally sent the Starfighter heading in the wrong direction to the start of the trench, and that's when I saw it. An area made up of shield generator walls, and once I flew through the ring I was able to go up and see a bunch of random paintings floating in the air. At the time, I didn't know what they were. In fact, for a while I thought I dreamt the whole thing up. But sure enough, it's real. The paintings are actually artwork from the LucasArts game Outlaws, which was released a few years prior to Starfighter. So there you have it, kids. Sometimes incompetence and stupidity can unlock amazing things. Back to you, Evan.
Thanks so much for coming on board, Flandrew. I've been a fan of his content for a while now, and it was really cool to get to work with him on this. Cheers, man. As for Star Wars Starfighter, I think my feelings on this game have been made pretty clear by this point. It's admittedly limited, yes, and you can probably 100% the thing and have nothing left to do in roughly 8 hours, which is really pushing it on the content side of things. If I had bought this game for its $50 price tag back in the day, I'd probably be a bit harsher on it. But even with that said, the game is still really high quality for a PS2 game from 2001. I mean, it's just so much fun to play. And it's not like this game is coming off of anything that set some kind of major precedent either. I mean, it was the first Star Wars game on the PS2, and the devs were working with new tech. Honestly, the majority of LucasArts titles tended to be pretty short most of the time anyway. What we get when we jump into Star Wars Starfighter is a tight-knit and satisfying experience with a fun tie-in story that adds a lot of depth and intrigue to the first film's plot, while introducing us to new characters and locations that we hadn't seen before, but that still compels us all the same. I'm confident in saying that even after all of these years, Star Wars Starfighter is still a must-play for any and all fans of the series.
What a team!